Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we are doing a top 5 games I sold and bought again. So, a very simple topic. These are games that I owned, sold, and bought again, as the topic says. So, let's get right to it. Coming in at number 5 is a game called Dungeoneer. And Dungeoneer was available from about 2003 to about 2006. Originally designed by Thomas Denmark, who also did most of, if not all of the art for the game. So when this game first came out, there weren't very many adventure or dungeon crawl games on the market. Mainly only the stuff from Fantasy Flight Games, stuff like Runebound, Descent, and Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. So this was right at the beginning of my third phase into hobby gaming, and that is the phase that would eventually plant the seeds for the Dungeon Dive. Discovering these games at the game store, and I bought these at a small game store in Seattle called Gary's Games, but discovering these was really like a breath of fresh air for me, and for a number of reasons. I was craving this kind of game, this kind of big, or not big, but this kind of interesting thematic experience. And I also was not playing solo at the time. I was playing in a group. And so Dungeoneers is more of a group game than a solo game. And I think that's one of the reasons why it is so interesting. So Dungeoneer offers a unique kind of competitive dungeon crawling experience, one that pits heroes against heroes. It's not just a one versus many game. This is every hero, or every player is playing a hero, and you are competing to complete a number of quests before the other players. As players, you are moving your characters into new rooms throughout the dungeon. This is an entirely card-based dungeon crawl. And as you move from one room to the next, you generate two kinds of points that act as currencies. You generate glory points that you can spend to play good cards on yourself, and you generate peril points that your opponents can spend to play bad cards on you. It's super unique and still really hasn't been replicated in other games. There are pretty good solo rules available that are a combination of some fan-made house rules and the official solo variant. It has pretty good art for the most part. I think a lot of the art is good, but sometimes the theme of the game can feel a little pasted on. I did a big purge of stuff a few years before I started the Dungeon Dive, and this was one of the victims of that purge. I hadn't yet switched over to full solo play, and the groups I was playing with at the time really weren't into this game. But overall, the game is so unique that I just had to buy it again when I started the Dungeon Dive. There just isn't really anything else like it, and the boxes are super small, so it's very easy to store on the shelf. I have everything for it actually right here, so very, very nice. Okay, coming in at number 4 is Space Hulk from 1989. Of course, from Games Workshop and designed by Richard Hollowell. So Space Hulk was one of my original hobby games from phase 1 of my collecting and playing. This was probably the first big box hobby game I purchased with my own money. I probably had received either Shogun or Axis and Allies possibly for Christmas before this. But it felt amazing owning something like this when I was in high school. We had a gaming club at school, and we played this game all the time. We mixed it in with components and rules from Advanced Space Crusade and other 40K stuff to kind of make our own hybrid system. Even back then, I was like bashing games together and making house rules to kind of just create the kind of game that I wanted to play. I sold this when I moved to Southern California to focus on music. I needed some money. I sold a bunch of my games. I sold a bunch of my stuff, almost all of them, really. I wasn't really playing tabletop games like this at the time. My hobby time was basically spent with 70% live music, 25% on video games, and my tabletop gaming was all Magic the Gathering at this time. It's always been one of my favorite games, and when third and fourth edition finally came out, I just had to have it again. And this is still the best produced board game I own. It feels like a luxury item. Everything is so well made. The cardboard is at least twice as thick as cardboard from any other game. The tiles are embossed and they look amazing. The minis are exquisitely detailed. The documentation is super well written. This is just one of those games that you set up and just marvel at how good it looks. I don't play it as much as I would like to, and that's mainly because the focus is on a two-player competitive experience. There are okay solo rules out there, but it's just not the same. The drama of rolling your hits, having your guns jam, scraping by the skin of your teeth, and getting that final victory just aren't the same by yourself. Okay, number three, coming in at number three is Kingdom Death Monster, and that was originally from 2015, designed by Adam Poots. So I originally purchased Kingdom Death Monster when the first Kickstarter went to retail, when you could buy it from their website. And it was by far the biggest, most epic, and most expensive game that I had ever purchased. I bought a few expansions from eBay for super dumb prices because they were already out of print. I played through the campaign with some friends. I loved it. Some of my friends didn't. Some of my friends did love it. It was an absolutely gorgeous game that really spoke to me. And it's one of those games that is fun to just look at and experience, while it is also fun to play. But then everything went out of print and the prices skyrocketed. And I had my eyes on a new synthesizer at the time, a DSi Pro 2. So I was able to sell my KDM collection for actually a pretty hefty profit at the time, because I don't think there was any rumors of it coming back into print or something. I don't know what happened, but after that initial run sold out, the prices just went crazy. And I bought my DSi Pro 2, which to this day is still one of my favorite synthesizers that I have ever owned. I use it all the time. I love it to death. But then when KDM, when it got reprinted and 1.5 came out, I really wanted it again. I felt like my collection was missing. I felt like it had this huge kind of KDM-shaped hole to fill in that giant black coffin box. So I bought it along with most of the main expansions from the first, from 1.5. The game is just super unique. I love the theme and the dark atmosphere. It's super dark and mysterious. I love the mystery of KDM. It has a bunch of amazing random encounters. The combat is fluid and dynamic, and I love the settlement phase. I doubt I'll buy anything else for it. I know there's that rumored kind of dungeon crawl mode that might be coming out soon, and I do have on pre-order the Campaigns of Death, the new campaign book that uses the old expansions, but I don't think I'll get anything else for it. I feel like my KDM collection is complete. I'm happy with what I have, and honestly, we'll probably all be dead before that last Kickstarter ends up getting fulfilled, because I don't know what the heck is going on with that stuff. Okay, coming in at number 2 is Dungeon Run from 2011. And Dungeon Run is from Plaid Hat and designed by Mr. Bistro. I was able to actually meet and talk with Mr. Bistro not too long ago. Okay, so another really unique game, like KDM, like Dungeoneer. Dungeon Run is a unique game, one that I haven't seen. It scratches an itch that I haven't had scratched by any other game. This is one with a very interesting competitive mechanism that doesn't work very well solo, and another one like Dungeoneer that hasn't really been replicated by other games. So the first half of a game of Dungeon Run is co-op or kind of semi-co-op. The players are working together to explore a dungeon, laying down tunnels, moving from one room to the next, trying to find the boss, and then eventually kill the boss. And once the boss is killed, that unlocks I think it was the summoning stone, or basically the MacGuffin of the game. And then one of the players picks that up, and then the game switches to a competitive mode that's kind of like tag in the dungeon. And the first player to get out of the dungeon with the summoning stone, with the MacGuffin, is the winner. And you really do need to work together to defeat the boss, because once the boss comes out and the dungeon is shaped in a certain way, it always seems to create a really interesting end game scenario where if you don't work together, you will all lose. I recently played this game with the group and fell in love with it all over again. It does a lot with a small number of components. It has interesting dungeon tiles with traps and encounters. It has a really solid loot deck, a fun encounter deck, and interesting characters with meaningful level up choices. This one I sold during a purge when I was moving a few years before the dungeon dive. And it's so unique that I missed it and I needed it back in my collection. It's been out of print for a long time. I doubt it'll ever go back in print. So if it sounds interesting, maybe look for a used copy and check it out. Okay, and coming in number one, the game that I sold and I guess missed the most maybe, or my favorite game of these. I'm not sure how this is number one, but actually it's number one because this is the game that inspired this topic. So Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. Arkham Horror 2nd Edition was my reintroduction into the world of tabletop gaming. This is from 2005. Designed by Richard Launius and Kevin Wilson. So this was at the very, very beginning of like phase 3 of my tabletop gaming hobby. I had just moved to the Pacific Northwest, and with all of the rain and the gloom, I wanted to get back into tabletop gaming. I really wanted to get Talisman again, a game that almost made this list, but at the time it was out of print. There really weren't any games like Talisman on the market that I knew of. So I went to a game store local to me, and the employee there recommended Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. And I feel like I had discovered this holy grail of a gaming. There was so much stuff in that box. This was like a super talisman. There were so many encounter cards and monsters and spells and weapons and items and characters. The board looked awesome. It was big. It was epic. I was like a kid on Christmas morning opening this thing. I had never experienced a game like this before. But then I tried to learn and play it. And wow, games really had become far more complex during my brief time away from the hobby. I couldn't make heads or tails of the rules. And that led me to two very, very important discoveries. One would be Board Game Geek. And at Board Game Geek, I would discover Universal Heads rules summaries. So the esoteric order of gamers / Universal Head was an absolute godsend. Their rules summary and player aids for Arkham Horror made the game click for me. We started playing it all the time. That's when I put together this group, and we got together a lot and played Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, and then eventually we would start playing Descent 1st Edition. And I bought a few of the expansions, but not all of them. I had 2 small box expansions and 1 large box expansion. However, during that purge I mentioned earlier, I decided to sell it. I had played it so much that I just wanted to kind of move on. I wanted to free up some space and get a little bit of money to buy some other things. I think I ended up selling a bunch of stuff, and I bought a Fender Rhodes. I tend to do that. I'll get into one hobby, sell stuff to fund another hobby, and then sell stuff from that hobby to go back and refund stuff from the previous hobby. But I didn't really miss it. And when Eldritch Horror came out, I thought, well, wow, this scratches that Arkham Horror 2nd Edition itch perfectly. And Eldritch Horror, I think, actually does a lot of stuff better than Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. And then 3rd Edition came out, and that is a game that I love a lot. I love it more than a lot of people do. And then I got into Elder Sign, and that game with the right expansions kind of feels like a small box version of Arkham Horror 2nd Edition with a Yahtzee thing going on. However, as the years went by, I realized that I really was missing Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. I felt like there was a place for it in my collection, and it needed to be there. My collection just didn't feel complete without it. I was missing it. I was missing those chaotic games of getting brutally beaten down. getting lost in time and space, getting devoured. I miss that intimate setting of Arkham City that Eldritch Horror kind of veered away from in order to focus on a more epic worldwide conflict. I missed all of the characters and I missed the messiness of the game. And so a few weeks ago, I actually bought a complete collection. All of the pictures you are seeing on this video are the games that I own. I bought everything for it. Two of the small box expansions and two of the large box expansions hadn't even been opened yet. So I got to experience the joy of being the first one to really dig into them. And like I said, this is the purchase that inspired this list. This purchase inspired a literature project that I'm working on my sister channel, All Fiction is Fantasy, where I am reading, recommending, and reviewing a story that covers each of the elder ones, each of the ancient ones, the great old ones, the outer gods, featured in Arkham Horror 2nd edition. And later this year, I am going to be doing a deep dive into this series. So, all right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this list of the top 5 games I sold and repurchased. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.